Welcome back, everyone, to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. Big show. I know a lot of you have been anticipating Jeff's 2023 forecast, and so have I. I'm really excited about this show tonight. So tomorrow is the Winter Solstice, December 21st, and I've got a list of questions for you. Jeff, are you ready for them?
Sure, fire away.
Okay, well, tomorrow is the winter solstice, right? So tell us about why that's such a significant energy in the world.
Well, the solstices and equinoxes they've always been known throughout time as exceedingly powerful energies. I mean, when you look at many of the monoliths that have been built, like Chaco Canyon, there were places in India were built that, and also Stonehenge is said to line up with certain celestial points. Even the pyramids, certain aspects of them were to line up at solstical points with fixed stars. So this has been something throughout history that many places throughout the world have paid great honor to. And the reason why is actually pretty simple. The Earth is sitting at about a 23-degree, 44-minute angle. It's not exact, but pretty close to that. And as it goes around the sun, because of that angularity, it's called the obliquity of the ecliptic. The sun appears to go south to its farthest point at the winter solstice. And of course, the solstices and equinox points are the farthest south and the farthest north. You have the summer solstice, which is where the sun is farthest north. And that's, of course, where the days are longest. Well, the winter solstice is exactly when the days are shortest. So why are these significant? And so are the equinoxes. The equinoxes are also when the days and nights are equal. And that, of course, happens at the spring and the fall equinoxes. So throughout history, this has been a huge factor. And the energies are always marked at these points. So the winter solstice is often considered when the ebb is at the lowest. The days, again, are the shortest. The sun sets very, very early, which we all find in the Northern Hemisphere. For those people who are listening, I just did a person in Australia today, so I got to think about all those folks down under, right? Underneath the equator, where the water goes backwards. So, and it does. It's pretty bizarre. So the bottom line is the other side of the equator, that's going to be their longest day, right? And again, I actually have a picture I can just put up real briefly. I mean, everybody has seen this before, but this is kind of cool. You'll see here is a picture of the angularity of the Earth. And you can see here, there's the South Pole, North Pole, and of course, it's at an angle. You would think that the poles would be perpendicular to the sun, but they're not. They're actually, at that oblique angle because of that. So as we go around the sun, this is a really important time of the year. And of course, the holidays are around this. It's Hanukkah right now. It's Christmas coming up here. So very important times of the year, because the energies is often a time where you want to take care of yourself. I always like to mention this is a wonderful time to do cleansings, to do rest, to do detoxing. I love reflexology. I've always loved reflexology because reflexology really is probably one of my more favorite tools, because what it does is it always cleanses the body and opens up the meridian points. So I mention that because the solstices and the equinoxes are the 4 points of the year that are always important to do that, to either cleanse or make changes in your diet or your health and all that stuff. So it's a really powerful point.
A lot of self-care, right? It's a time for a lot of self-care. We feel like that. We feel like eating good food, at least I do, good comfort food, meditating, a lot of that kind of thing around this time of year. Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I also find too that, again, in the Northern Hemisphere, this is when it's the dead of winter. Winter truly starts at the winter solstice because the weather always follows the equinoctial and solstice points. Like when the spring equinox hits, that's when winter ends. The snow melts in the north. And of course, we start to see spring come in. The birdies are chirping and all that to the peak of the winter solstice with the days are longest. And then, of course, summer follows after that. So these are really cool points. There's also also, this is a great time for meditations. Many different remedial measures were practiced during this time. There's many mantras that were done in the Vedic tradition and also in the Western tradition where people would immerse into very sacred times. So it's often a really good time too to kind of light a candle and meditate on it, because it's the true celestial end of the year, in my opinion. And the new beginning of the year, believe it or not, is the spring equinox. We, in the West, we celebrate January 1st as kind of the Gregorian calendar new year, right? And everybody has their celebrations. But really, in the ancient system, the spring equinox was really the beginning of the year. So it's really, really cool to look into all these ancient kind of energy points. And I think we lose that so much today, being in our modern world. Everybody's on the internet, everybody's in cars, everybody's in their worlds of their homes or their technocratic world. And it's really good to get in touch with the celestial energies because it affects us all, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think when we're more aware of it, it's really positive.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's get into it then. Talking about energy, let's talk a bit about financial energy for 2023 for the United States. Gosh, what does that look like?
Well, it's really interesting, because I do keep a pulse on the news. I like to hear what they're telling us what to think, right? But we just found out, it's now become manifest that the jobs report was a total lie. The Biden administration told us, those are 1 million jobs added this year. Well, they found out it's a lot closer to about 10,000. Now, that's not a little discrepancy. That's like a really big discrepancy. That's like, a big boo-boo.
There is.
And what's interesting about that is the effect that it's had on the financial world, because the Fed actually premised the interest rates on all of this. So we're seeing, a really interesting scenario. I don't think, we're going to have a recession. I think we're in one. I think they're just telling us we're not and pretending like it's not there, but we're in a recession. I only see it getting deeper. And what's kind of scary is I did a lot of work here for this 2023 forecast, looking at just, what is really coming up in 2023 for the United States? Well, one of the most important things is we're going to have something called Saturn's transit of the moon really go full on for the United States starting January 17th. It's already been there for the last 2 years. Do we need astrology to tell us that? But so Saturn begins to transit the moon right on January 17th. That's when it really begins for the United States. But that's one factor that happens about every 28 and a half years. So you can only get maybe 3 of these in a century. So it's, the next one will spill over into the next century. It's almost 80 something years, 84 years, and that's approximate. It's actually a little bit more than that. But long story short, this is a really dire time. I've been saying this for a long, long time, and I've been talking to a lot of people about this. Every day I get the opportunity to speak to such a diverse amount of people throughout the world. And it's really kind of a blessing because I get to hear from all walks of life, their perspectives. Some of these people are in the politics. Some of these people are in different areas of business. And I'm not hearing good stories from anyone. What the astrology says is it's mirroring that. Remember, I've been talking for years about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And I really want to drive something home here right now. A lot of people think, when's the next big event going to happen? Well, they're always going to keep happening. And I've got a couple here I'm about to expose that I've not talked about ever before. In fact, this is the first show compared to any radio show that I'm actually going to reveal some of the really kind of dire energies that are around the United States. And, for the people in the rest of the world, I'm not trying to just focus on the United States, but it affects the world because the petrodollar, and I think the United States is really the final pillar here in, democracy. And if it falls or has major problems, it's going to really affect the rest of the world. So, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute to the rest of the world. But the thing I'm seeing here is not only Saturn's transit of the moon, which is always a serious kind of dire time, and it tends to parallel a lot of the ebbs in finances. But we've also had Mars retrograde. Mars retrograde is very exceedingly powerful because what it does is Mars tends to bring a reversal in the forces of life. Mars in the Nadi astrology is often referred to as the Dea, or the force of, you could say, energetics in the body, so on and so forth. And it's been retrograde ever since the end of October. And it's not going to go direct until the middle of January. Well, that's just about the time the United States Saturn goes right over the moon. Furthermore, and I want to tie this into what's really happening in the world. Again, we just have been hearing about all these Twitter dumps. We're now finding what we already knew, but we're finding proof that the lies are in fact true. So if that makes sense to you, but in other words, we're finding out that many of the manipulations that everyone has known and suspected is now provable. And, a lot of events just have happened over the last few weeks. I mean, look at Trump has just now been indicted. He's not so much indicted, but the January 6th committee is referring criminal things to the Justice Department. I actually don't see that really going too far. I really don't. But, we'll get into that later. But the bottom line is, the United States and the economy. And what the big picture is the Neptune square Mars. And I want to go into this a little bit. See, Neptune square Mars can only happen once every 180 years. That's a long time. That's several lifetimes. So, or generations, if you want to look at it that way. So, the last time this happened, and I've said this many times before, was right before the Civil War. Okay. So, and right after that series got finished, the Civil War broke out. Now, when we think about where the United States is right now, how could anything like that ever happen in modern times? For sure, we don't have a North and a South anymore. There's not any kind of a division that would make sense like that. But I think we might see something that is much more dissensional and very hard to define as a quote unquote civil war. It might just be civil unrest. And I hope I'm wrong about this. I really do. But when I got looking at the United States, there's something in astrology known as primary directions. Primary directions is a fancy term for each year equals a rotation of the Earth. So in other words, when a person's born or a country is born, each revolution of the Earth, and if you're a flat earther, it's still the cycle of the sun, or the daily diurnal cycle, is a year. Well, the United States is 246 years old. And I haven't really disclosed this before, but what I found is kind of dire, because what we've got, and I'm actually going to show this real briefly on the screen. So, okay, this is the United States Sibley chart, or you could say the birth chart of the United States on the inner wheel. Now, I've never shown this before, and I didn't really catch this until just recently. The primary directed Mars of the United States. See, it's taken 246 years for Mars to go from here, where I'm circling in the birth chart, all the way around to here. Remind you, the United States is 246 years old. Well, 1 degree is a year. Now, if you look at right here, it says 0A56. So just stick with me here. It's pretty simple. 1 degree is a year. 45 minutes is 9 months. 30 minutes is 6 months, and 15 minutes is 3 months. So you can see it's OA56. Now, we are sitting right here, literally on the winter solstice of 2020. Now, I'm going to put up one other graph, and I'm going to show you when is that exact. Well, it's exact right here. At the latter part of next year, you're going to see that moon and that Mars will actually conjoin on the United States. It's the Mars on the moon. Bing bong right there. It's going to be right at the end of November of 2023, about November 28th. Okay, so there's the timing on that. Now, the big question is what the heck does it mean? Well, I can tell you it's happening. Moon and Mars, you don't need to know much about astrology to know that that is not a very nice energy at all. Moon and Mars is violence, it's emotional unrest, it's intensity, and it's definitely a lot of anger and potential unrest. And I wish that wasn't there, because my job is to be honest and tell people what the chart says. So when you couple the Neptune square Mars, which is the thing that happened just before the Civil War, and then you couple the primary directed Mars, the planet of war and violence, conjuncting the moon, which is the public, and etc., this is not a good omen. And I love to give good news, folks. I do not like to give bad news and, be at all fatalistic. And I'm not being that way. But I'm saying it's better to know this than to assume it's not a problem. So I see finances deepening. And I hate to say this, and this is where I was going here for the last couple of years. Everyone said to me, Jeff, what do you think of the Mayan calendar? What do you think of Nibiru? I said, not much. I said, but watch out from 2020 forward. So we already had the fascist event. And I think the global unrest we're seeing Europe literally be infiltrated. The borders in Europe are being flooded. The borders in the United States are being flooded. Elections are being manipulated all around the world. Crazy stuff has happened. People are getting arrested in Europe. So I like to be the bearer of good news on the winter solstice, but I also want to be the bearer of honest news of what the astrology bears. And I would say this is a very dire time right now. And it's exactly what I've been saying in the past, is we are seeing a clash of globalism and communism, or you could say nationalism combining. It's literally globalism and nationalism going head to head. The question is, who's going to win? Okay. Now, here's some good news, because I don't want to sound all dire. And by the way, I'm not telling you all the bad news either. About a year and a half from now, which is also the United States year of the next presidential election, has another real nasty coming at us. And this is called primary directed Saturn, the planet of karma, conjuncting the planet of war. And when is that? It's exactly a year and about maybe 8 months from right now, which is going to put us, in fact, here, I can even go up and show you that one too, because it's kind of important to see this. And what I'll do is I'll share the screen one more time, just because this stuff is very, very important. And, even though it's a little beyond 2023, it's, I think, going to be set up in 2023. And I'll show you when that is. We're going to use this same chart, and as long as we're here, because I'll be talking more about this, obviously, in 2024. But you can see right here in the fall of 2024, the planet of karma, Saturn, joins the planet of Mars. So in the United States. So what does this mean? I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat that one. I have never seen Saturn and Mars join and not have some pretty significant events. So now I told you I was going to say good news, right? So the good news is, and this is what pleases me, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something that I haven't said before, but there's something sitting in front of the Supreme Court right now that may throw a grenade in our lives if they adjudicate a possible way that I have actually been asked. I've had people ask this question. Jeff, what do you think is going to happen about the case sitting in front of the Supreme Court about Congress approving the election of 220? No, this is pretty bizarre. But I keep getting that we're going to see a big surprise. Now, the Congress has to approve foreign interference before, or in other words, the research has to be done on that before they can just certify the election. And apparently they didn't. And the reason they didn't was this big to-do about the January 6th issue. So what's interesting, and again, I'm just reading the astrology here and responding to questions, they just might throw a grenade in the room. And look what happened with Roe versus Wade. No matter which side you feel on that was a grenade in the country. It really caused dissension. You want to cause dissension. If we come back and do something like this would cause, oh my God, this is over the top. So could it happen? Yes, it could. And it's before the Supreme Court as we speak, and it's about to be adjudicated upon. And I think if you are ever going to see a time of some pretty crazy stuff happening in the United States, causing further division and dissension, this would certainly be it. Now, will it happen? It leans towards it might. It just leans towards it might. Now, that's pretty incredible, wouldn't you say?
It is pretty incredible.
That's pretty incredible. So, we live in incredible times, and I have been saying for a long time, look at 9/11. That was the Saturn-Pluto opposition. Look at the banks crashing. When people look into these events, they didn't just happen. Yes, the planes hit the buildings and all that, but there was a lot of things prepared that seemed to be in alignment with all those events happening. And particularly with COVID, when you look at COVID and all the other stuff that's coming out on Twitter right now, it's pretty substantial. It's really substantial. They've actually got direct evidence of payments with the FBI colluding with the Pentagon in Twitter. Now, that's just what we're uncovering because Elon Musk bought Twitter. What's going on in the places nobody's talking? And, we're beginning to see here what Eisenhower warned about, and that was a quote unquote secret government. He called it the military industrial complex, that is really much more in power than we think. I always said, I don't think presidents run this country. And the few that have tried, they've either gotten crushed or killed. And again, I don't think even the politicians run this country at all. They certainly are at the bottom end of the funnel and they vote and all that. But it's really the flow of money. And if you look at the finances of this country right now, this is incredible what's happening. I mean, they just approved this omnibus funding bill, which is staggering amount of money. Just for a perspective, they said all the budgets combined up to the Reagan era might have been $1 trillion. What they just approved like 1.7 trillion plus. And they're throwing stuff in this budget nobody's ever going to be able to read. I mean, when you get a 4,000 page stack of stuff on your desk, how are you going to read that? Especially when it's cryptically written in legal language. Not a chance.
Right.
Not a chance. So, again, I want to stay positive here, because I always believe God and divinity and good always wins. But we have to also be aware that this is very dire times. And I think it's being set up. I think there's a lot more going on with the border crises and what's being infiltrated here. There's a lot of masking going on. I really think we are witnessing an out-and-out attempt at global communism. And they're going to couch it in a much more high-tech way than the old-fashioned communism. If they put in digital currency, and the only way they can really do that is if they flatten the economies and everyone goes broke and screams, please save us. Everyone I talk to in business is saying, we're really nervous because supply chains are very thwarted. Prices are accelerated because of the cost of fuel and the climate change ruse that's been going on, let alone, I'm not even going to get into the COVID and all the other stuff on the vax that we've been hearing. So it's really, really a very dire time. And again, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020 has effects that actually range close to 38 years. Look at how long 9/11 lasted for. The effects of 9/11 lasted 20-something years. 20-something years with Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, we survived it, and we'll survive this one too. But this is a time where I think fascism and freedom are like this. And you could just recouch that into globalism and nationalism, or communism and freedom is probably the better way to say it. So we're there. And I would love to have the most positive, blessed message for the holidays and all that. But on the other hand, if the house is on fire and you're on the other end and you just say, well, it's not on fire here. Don't worry, it'll get over there. So if you don't put it out. So we got a fire burning right now, and it is literally fascism. And I think, Elon Musk, whether you like him or hate him, I think has really done an incredible service to expose proof of this stuff. And I think the backlash on this is going to be far greater than anyone realizes. And that's what the astrology shows. The United States is about to go through one of the most dramatic times of its existence. Mind you, also, the Pluto return in the sidereal zodiac is happening all through the end of next year into 2024, the election year. That's exactly what I just showed you earlier with that primary directed Saturn conjuncting Mars. And to be really clear, this has never, ever, ever happened before. These primary directions only happen once every 360 years. So that puts an emphasis on how significant this is.
Yeah. Well, I think it's right what you're saying about there is positivity in knowledge, a tremendous amount of positivity in knowledge. You better know it so you can set yourself up, so you can protect yourself,
exactly,
loved ones. Yeah.
I would say this is I think it's one of the most critical times the United States will ever see in its existence. Clearly, remember the Roman Empire divided at about 250 years. And then it went completely destruct on the second 250-year cycle. It existed about 500 years, approximately 400 something odd years. I don't know the exactness, but it certainly seemed to parallel the Pluto returns almost exactly. And many historians say that. They say, most places exist, or they go through great trauma every 250 years. And we're in it. We are in it. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized, wow, we're really in it. I mean, even deeper than I realized, because we have the confluences of this very subterfuge Neptune square Mars. And I can't emphasize, that is, when you look at the political scene back in the Civil War, it was the same thing going on. There was all kinds of trickery going on, subterfuge. There was a lot more, and it's wonderful that slavery got abolished. But there was a lot of other factors going on between the government and all the stuff with Lincoln. Look, Lincoln got assassinated. So there's a lot of stuff that was happening during that time. And this one's even more significant. It's a more precarious, dangerous time. And I wish I could say, no, it isn't. I wish I could say, wow, folks, it's all love and light. Well, it is all love and light. It's humanity that screws it up. I love the human race. It's people that really drive me nuts sometimes.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Yeah. Well, you've spoken about the Jupiter progression in past podcasts. So how does that play into?
Thank you for bringing that up.
How does this?
That's the positive news. And that's where I think, and that's also paralleling why I think we might potentially see something happen with the Supreme Court. Our founding fathers were so substantial. I mean, the more I look at the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, which got formed, I think it was 1789, if I'm correct. The Bill of Rights was being put all into place and voted in. And it's ingenious because even in today's modern technocratic society, those are the basic rights and freedoms that every person of any race, any creed, gender, etc., or belief has a right to have. It is the opposition to tyranny. And throughout history, we've always seen despotic rulers, try and control everyone. I can't think of anything more controlling than digital currency. And all of this stuff, they know they're not going to get us to agree to do it. But boy, I'll tell you what, if you can starve everybody out and the economics, I was just listening to an economist today who was with the Reagan administration. He said the same thing. He said, this is really dire, much more so than people realize. And I'm not trying to create alarm here, but I'm also trying to create awareness, is that you just can't keep printing and spending and printing and spending like they're doing. Yes, the Fed is hedging it, but what they're doing right now, they're literally flattening the possibility of growth in GDP when the Fed raises interest and growth hasn't, come up. Now, if you had growth, that'd be one thing, but they don't have growth. Right. And they lied about it. They lied. There was 1 million jobs added this year plus, and it really ends up being 10,000. That sounds like Neptune square Mars to me in the astrology.
Right. Yep. Yep. Neptune square Mars.
Again, for lack of a better expression, folks, that's urinating down your back and telling you it's raining, right? So, I mean, you hate to say it, but this is the reality, and it truly, truly is. And, again, I'd be really wrong to not mention this primary directed. That primary directions, again, are what they call solar arcs in modern astrology. They're probably one of the more accurate types of astrology I've seen, along with the Nadi and the Vedic. And it actually came out of the Egyptians and the Chaldeans, the Greeks, no one really knows, but it's quite magical. And I find when there's good ones, things really go good. I've looked at this like IPO stock offerings with companies. When we see good solar arc or primary directions hitting, the company goes up. When we see bad, it does horrible or dissolves. When it does nothing, it kind of does nothing. It just goes sideways. So the United States has a couple of doozies here coming over this next 2 years. And that's exactly what I've been saying. We're in a Pluto return, folks. This is the make or break. The United States is either going to be destroyed or it's going to be the phoenix rising out of the ashes. And I still bet that the founding forefathers were smart enough to put the triggers in and the balances and checks with the Supreme Court and other judicial checkpoints that I think we just might get saved by them. I said that in an earlier podcast.
Yeah,
I think the Supreme Court could save our butt here. And, people are going to blow a fuse, but at least the program ones. But clearly, crazy times. Crazy
times. Well, let's take a little shift here over to Biden and Harris, because in a previous podcast, I want to check in with you about them. You had mentioned that there would be some upset in the Biden-Harris presidency. What does the astrology have to say about that?
The same exact thing that supports everything I just said. I really, and I do want to share the screen again. I'm going to put up Biden and Harris's inauguration charts. See, all throughout history, kings, sultans, pharaohs, all would look at the time that they were inaugurated. Well, this is the Biden-Harris chart for Biden's inauguration. And you can see here, this was done January 20th of 2021 at about 11:48 a.m. He was sworn in. Well, notice we got Pluto, the Sun, and Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury all lined up here at the midheaven. Except here's the problem. The Sun, which is indicative of the ruler. See, the Sun was always considered to be the leader, the king, the president, the, whatever, prime minister, whatever you wanted to call the leader of a nation, is always the general factor of the Sun. Well, look at this. You can actually see the Sun is conjuncting the Saturn within 3 degrees, 4 minutes. Now, in primary direction, folks, that's 3 years. Where are we right now? Let's do the math. As of January 20th of 2023, we are starting the third year. See, 21 to 22 is 1, 22 to 23 is 2. I don't see this man going past his third year. I really don't. I think further, the moon, the all-important moon. It's interesting about the moon. The moon almost acts like a funnel. I've had some really interesting conversations with a lot of people. If you look at the tree of life, this is all the planets. Look at how it looks like a funnel down to Earth. This is the Earth right here. So what's interesting, and of course, we're all here on the Earth. And if you look at here's another diagram that kind of depicts it just a little different way. You could see this, of course, is the Earth, this blue sphere here. So the moon is always been considered to be like the funnel. It's the end of the funnel. It's the narrow end of the funnel. It's where all the energy from the celestial forces channel through and spirit becomes manifest on the Earth. Well, why am I bringing that up? Well, let's go back to their inauguration chart. Look at what the moon is doing. The moon is squaring Saturn, and then it will go to, first it's squaring the Sun. Who's that? That's Biden. He is the leader. So there ain't nothing good in this chart that I like. The moon squares the Sun, which means adjustments and changes. Then it's going to go to a square to Saturn. And then it's going to go to a conjunction of Mars and Uranus. Plain English, not good. Not good at all. So, and other than what the news has basically mind controlled everybody into thinking, at least some people, it hasn't been too rosy of a presidency. I mean, other than the polls they lie to us about, not too many people are too happy about where this country's been going or what it's been doing.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's all right there in the chart. So 2023, do we think 2023 is going to be the year that Biden and Harris that presidency could fall apart? Is that what we're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. It's very, very likely. And again, wow. I know this sounds incredible, but if that happens and something with the Supreme Court happens on these adjudications, it would probably be the biggest upset in political history of the existence of this country. Now, when you take a Pluto return, the primary directed Mars conjuncting the United States moon, which has never happened before. Mars is violence, moon is upset. It's the public. So, and people are really upset about the whole COVID situation. I mean, we're on YouTube. Again, we're going to be coming out really soon, folks, on other channels really, really soon. And we can talk a little more freer. But, I want to kind of curb it a little bit here. But, I mean, there's overwhelming videos in existence. Look what Ron DeSantis is doing right now with his investigation into the whole COVID situation. It's atrocious. And I have a lot of doctors who've talked about this, and they've told me, and, they know a lot more about this vaccine and the whole COVID situation than I'm ever going to know. I'm not a doctor. But I can tell you it parallels the astrology. And I'm not hearing good things. I'm not hearing positive things at all, So, and I wish I were. And I know a lot of people who have had it and they're fine. But I also have heard and seen and witnessed a lot of things that are not too positive. And there's definitely been a fascist force that has been on working towards humanity globally that has been exceedingly dangerous, and when you look at that, that's been going on ever since 2020 forward.
Right. Well, we talked about this. I mean, we can call it a demonic force as well.
It is a demonic force. There's no question. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep. It's a demonic force for sure.
It exactly is. And see, this is what has plagued the human race for thousands of years, and quite possibly since the existence of humanity. These forces are interbred in this dimension. I've mentioned many times some of the Puranas in the Vedic tradition, the Sharia Yogam in the Hebrew tradition. You look at the Garden of Eden story, so on and so forth. Every culture of this world had talked about a demonic group of angels that were cast down. Of course, in the West, we hear about Lucifer, Satan, Belial, and Leviathan. And is that story true? I absolutely do think it's true. And I think it's more true than we'll ever know. I think they're literally entangled right down into the molecular forces of birth, death, and decay in this world. Mm-hmm. And I think they're forced to do it. Here's the good news, though. When you look at that, they say the upper angels of the seraphims, cherubims, and the throne and God above is what holds them in abeyance. And if they weren't, I don't think the universes would exist for a nanosecond, because I think they're actually forced to be a part of that element of creation. Right. And they're incarcerated. So, and they'll do anything and this is why we see all the horrible, evil stuff on the world, but we also see all the good too. Right. I mean, look at birth, look at the sun, look at, plants and animals and people and the beauty of this world. This is why evil never, ever wins. Mm-hmm. With the astrology, and this is, I think, what I want to drive home about this podcast is I'm not sitting here saying all bad news. What I am saying is there is bad news, and I'm not going to lie about it. Right now, my opinion is this is one of the most dire times this country will ever see, at least in our lifetimes, I can tell you that. And it's substantial. And I can tell you that these energies are very likely to play themselves out over the next 2 years. I mean, you can't sugarcoat Mars and Moon conjuncting. That is fingernails on the chalkboard. It might even be a little bit of Krakatoa too. It's very explosive, very, very explosive, and very intense. And again, we do have Mars retrograding. I see the financial situation getting very deep here and not correcting itself. How could it? The best economists in the world are all predicting really dire situations. And these are people using technical models. It's just exactly what the astrology says. It mirrors reality.
Yeah, it mirrors reality.
It mirrors reality. And this primary directed Mars conjuncting the moon is quite powerful. And again, let me put that up again, just because it is happening in 2023. When? I'll show you. See, if we go back to the United States, this is a graph that all the dashed lines are the planets in the United States birth chart. And the angular lines are what we call the primary directions. Well, again, when we look right there, folks, November 28th of 2023. And I have to tell you, that doesn't just mean when it happens. It's in what we call orb and effect, stronger and stronger as 2023 bears on. Particularly, so you got to watch when we start hitting, say, like spring, it's going to be within 30 minutes of arc. See, in the degrees, 1 degree of orb is called the influence. Well, it's already right now sitting at, 48 minutes. So, and there's 60 minutes per degree. So you have to kind of conceptually grasp this. See, if I put that chart back up, you can see, in fact, it's very visual when I put the chart up. So you can see I'm selecting primary or solar arc directions. You can graphically see it right here. That where I'm circling is the primary directed Mars. Took exactly 246 years to get right there, folks. And it's going to conjoin the United States moon. Moon is general significator of the populace, the public. And it's happening in the third house. Now, I hope I'm wrong, but that's an indicator that daily routines or travel could be disrupted. Now, what might do that? Well, if you get civil unrest bad enough or some kind of rioting and stuff, you will see martial law or some type of stuff come in. Could it happen? Yes, it could. With that kind of thing, that's the kind of energy that could really get pretty insane. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope next year we're doing another podcast and I can actually say I was wrong, because I'd love to be wrong about this. But I can tell you in my life and looking at thousands of charts over the years, I've never seen solar arc primary directions like this be wrong. Never seen it. So you can actually see right here is OA 56. Well, watch, if I go forward in monthly increments, that you can see is going to go to 30 minutes of arc right there by this June. By the summer solstice, this thing will be shorter than 30 minutes of arc, which in plain English is just short of 6 months. So, and again, we saw November 28th. If all my math is right in the computer here, and I believe it is, we're going to see that happen. So powerful, powerful stuff. I cannot emphasize how powerful this is. And I mean, it truly, truly is.
Yeah.
So I say, be aware, and also, I think to be aware of this, this is what this country may have to go through to get rebalanced again. Yeah. Because Eisenhower warned about this. This is, whatever you want to call it, swamp, industrial military complex, deep state, all these different words. It's really the effect of the owners at the top of the pyramid influencing this. And I also think this is a global effort. We hear Klaus Schwab, we hear, Bill Gates, we hear, things like, George Soros, who contributes massive amounts to political campaigns and influences. Those are the names we hear. I think it's the owners above that, the international bankers who do not have humanity's best interest at hand. I think they'd like to slaughter 3/4 of the human race and replace us all with AI. I'd love to be wrong about that, but that's certainly what they act like. Yeah.
Well, phew.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I want to ask you.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to be positive today, but I am positive because
You are
we're all
positive.
spiritual
Oh, yeah.
beings having a physical experience. It might be a blessing that we're all here and we hold the space. And I also think the justice in this country is going to come forward because of that progression of Jupiter starting over the United States water trine.
Right.
And when does that begin? Well, if my math is right around January 4th to the 6th, somewhere in that area of this year, 2023.
That's right.
So what does this all mean? I think we're again going to see this clash of globalism and communism and freedom and the United States nationalism really come head to head. And it's got to happen because it's so entrenched. This cancer is so entrenched that it has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, let's look at Europe and China for a second, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the human rights violations. Let's talk about the economy, right?
Yeah.
What is the astrology looking like in 2023 about all of that?
Well, I see China having a lot of trouble. China has also the CCP anyhow, which is the Communist, Party of China, which really began in 1921. That's showing it's under Sati Sate too. In other words, it has a 28.5-year cycle of Saturn over its moon, and that is really getting strong. In fact, it's going to go, interestingly enough, very strong coming right up. In fact, it's kind of in a sense almost paralleling in an uncanny sense the United States. Well, Let me get that up so I can see. Yeah. I'm looking at it right now up on the screen because I want to be accurate here. But yeah, it is, I can't believe it. It's doing, see, both the United States and China, when they were formed, had the moon in the air trine of Aquarius. And that's very interesting because, when you talk about souls, I've been studying more and deeper into Nadi astrology. And you can really see where free will is and where free will actions happen. In other words, karmas that we're creating versus karmas that we're forced to bear. And there's all these very complex aspects called yogas in the chart that actually show this. And both the United States and China have the moon in the what we call moon trine. It's the karma moon trine. What am I saying? It's the karma sun trine, the karma sun trine of air. See, air and fire rules the sun, water and earth rules the moon. And that means that both of these countries have Saturn going right over its moon starting in January, both countries.
Wow.
And look what's going on in China. China has got epidemic stuff going on right now. People are freaking out. They've got all this, rioting and dissension against the government. They're over there, touting the Bill of Rights right now, and they're incarcerating people, hauling people away in these internment camps or killing them or whatever they do. And then there's this huge pandemic that they have going on. They're claiming they're having like a second wave of COVID. All these people have gotten inoculated and now they're getting COVID really bad. And there's a lot of deaths. And I hear that the United States is exceedingly worried because all the pharmaceutical drugs of antibiotics and Tylenol and ibuprofen and other drugs are made in China. Mm-hmm. So this is actually a great time again for the transformation of the United States to bring manufacturing back here and not be so interdependent on China.
I can't believe that hasn't even happened.
Well, they actually are working on it. I hear that
a little bit. A little bit. Yeah.
I know back 40 years ago, I was working at times in Chicago with Abbott Laboratories and Pfizer. I got hired on different design jobs in some of their facilities for their audiovisual departments. And I can tell you, they certainly have the facility here in the United States to do it. It's gargantuan. They could flip a switch and bring all that stuff right back online. So, we can't believe what we're being told by the media and by the government. I mean, I think if anything that Twitter has done, all this, exposing of all this Twitter dumps is the lies are true, folks. They're really lying, So it's,
yes. And I think we kind of knew that, right?
Oh yeah, you don't need, we didn't need that, but it's really wonderful to have the confirmation that's there, So
absolutely.
It's really, really powerful.
Absolutely. And, yeah. So what about the human rights violations? What are we going to see happen in Europe? I mean, it's just
really bad. It's really bad. I was talking to a friend of mine and a client, a dear friend, in Europe, and I won't mention where, but I was complaining. I said, my gas bill and my electric bills have like doubled here in the United States. He said, Jeff, we're up 4 times. I said, wow. So, we got it a lot better here than people have it in other places. It's pretty dire. And when you look at the immigration situations over there, it's like the globalists are flooding this place. They're trying to create a global financial collapse. That's my opinion. And this is probably, again, a move that they've had planned for many decades. And the reason why I know a lot of these people in secret societies are very tuned into the cycles of astrology. Never before in history have we had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction that close to a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. That was what we call a mutation conjunction. See, there's very ancient astrology that goes all the way back to the flood of Noah. And it is when Saturn and Jupiter join in very specific places, fire trines, air trines, water trines, and earth trines. Well, we just had Jupiter and Saturn join in the air trine on the winter solstice of 2020, exactly 2 years ago. And it is ushering in a high-tech era that I think these people knew about, and these globalists are manipulating it to try and really incarcerate. I think they screwed up. I think they moved too fast, and I think they didn't bet on the fact that people are smarter than they gave us credit for. And we'll see that now, whether that comes to bear. This is a force that's always, it's a demonic force that's always been against humanity. It's always been this resistance, and it's built into this particular reality,
Yeah. So to sum everything up, Jeff, what would you like to leave us all with? I loved when you were talking about the positivity that's in the world. There's so much beauty, nature, animals, people.
And your soul is indestructible. Beauty. Your spirit is indestructible. People do horrible things to each other financially. They do vicious things legally. I see them do it physically, violence, all that. But it's interesting. A friend of mine who died, I wanted to have him on our show, and that was Claude Swanson. For anybody who has heard of him, Claude Swanson's been on Coast. He lived in Tucson, and he wrote a couple of wonderful books. He was a physicist, and he worked for DARPA. And Claude was one of the few physicists who really got into consciousness and trying to analyze it from the hard sciences point. And one of the discussions that we had kind of relates to positive thinking, goal setting, free will, and where all this has come tonight. And that is, and this is very important, he talked about quantum entanglement. And it is believed that every thought we hold literally emits out of the third eye chakra and resonates at some point in the universe in a molecule in a star somewhere. Now, that's all hypothetical theories, but I believe it's true. And the reason I do is because if you look at the Upanishads, you look at all of the ancient texts in the Hebrew, they all talk about the whole celestial matrix of the stars might just be angels, folks. The astronomers laugh at this stuff. They say, well, it's gases and masses, right? And light years and distances and gravities and black holes, which they're all right. Okay, it's certainly measurable on the physical plane, and I find that stuff fascinating. But I also find how the ancients knew, and I'm blessed because I get to do this every day. I get to look at the fixed stars, which are believed to be the angels that support the ascendant in a birth chart. And I'm blown away with how accurate this stuff is. And, people always say, well, how did you know that's, and I'm like, hey, it's not my genius. I'm looking at ancient texts that allow me to see with the calculations, these yogas and, even a portion of what we know about astrology is so divine. What does this prove? This proves we're in literally a divine matrix of purification and rectification. And I believe the earth is that. I really do. The earth may be like a grounding rod for us to come here, experience, have fun, but also we seem to be bearing, if you will, the yoke or the cross, or however you want to put that, of karmic dissipation of not only our own souls, but the interconnected Gordian knots of our soul roots to other people we either give birth to, marry, have relationships with, get in fights with, love, etc. All of this seems to be that incredible amalgam. And when you remove yourself from the direct engagement of being personally offended by it all, it changes your perspective. And we start looking more at wisdom and truth. And I think that's where we got to be in these very challenging times, so that we become wiser. We rise above it and realize we're really just participants in a spiritual way to the events that are happening. And truth always comes out. Truth always comes out. Truth always wins. And no matter how horrible something is, there's always a divine ending to the story. Even when we see people get really horribly treated and killed and all this stuff, the soul goes on. And from the texts I've studied, it actually shows there is a divine kind of redemption in there. It's very deep stuff, and way beyond what any of us are going to fully understand. But amazing stuff. And I think, we're at a crescendo point in history. I mean, again, I always love to bring up my grandmother, who died at 102 years old, who witnessed World War I. She witnessed the Depression. She said it was so bad, Jeff, people were jumping out of the windows in Chicago. She lived right outside of Chicago, and saw the first cars coming by the farm in 1920 something, and then witnessed World War II. Those two wars were horrible. Millions of people died. And then we had the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and yet in between all those times, we don't focus on how amazing some of it was. It was really an astounding time. And life always is this ebb and flow and roller coaster of events, of positive and negative. It's a pendulum. It's always swinging back and forth.
Well, I feel like we need to practice some sort of spirituality now more than ever.
You bet. That's exactly right. I'm a really big fan of, it's called the Shemush Tehillim. It's the Psalms. And, the Psalms got smacked in the middle of the Bible. In the Western religion, right? But people don't know this. The Psalms, some of them are up to 4,000 years old. Psalm 91 was believed, and no one knows, I don't know, but I've heard from some pretty smart scholars that they say, based on the Aramaic and Hebrew, it could be 1800 BC, somewhere between 15 and 1900, I've heard. So to do the math, that's almost 4,000 years.
Wow.
And there's codes inside of those. If you can acquire something called the Shemush Tehillim, that means the method of the Psalms. You'll see what the religions did. They neutered them. They took all the codes and the angels that are encrypted in the verses out. And they also took out all of the meanings and purposes. Like, you can cleanse your home. You can remove spirits. You can protect your aura. In fact, one of the methods is reading Psalm 91 before you go to sleep at night and putting the 4 archangels around you. Now, that's been practiced in many current modern religions, but that's really powerful stuff. I know when I forget to do that stuff, you think, oh, it's just religious. No, it's not. It's energetic stuff that actually resonates. See, our thoughts literally resonate like tuning forks with other vibrations in the astral worlds, which is angels, spirits, intelligences, and elementals. See, it's almost, I used to study room acoustics, and I love that stuff, where we would look at how sound would reverberate in an acoustical room, like a concert hall or recording studio, or where pipe organs were. We did a study once at Carnegie Hall in New York. It was really fascinating, examining why that hall is probably one of the most acoustically perfect halls in the world. And the reason we studied it is because a man named Wallace Clement Sabin, who was an acoustician, genius mathematician, amazing, designed that. And I was actually teaching a class and we would examine that. It was a lot of fun. And it's analogous to consciousness, because when you vibrate in fear, worry, anxiety, and anger, you're probably going to attract more of it. And that's a hard thing to remember when we're kind of a Q-tip in the mud puddle. We're feeling all this anxiety. But we got to really back up and realize all of us are going to exit these meat suits called bodies sooner or later. I mean, it's inevitable, right? I don't care, how you try and avoid it. Death is inevitable. And they actually say death is a purification and rectification when you go naturally, however that is. All of us are going to exit the body a different way. Suicide is really bad because they say you end up in astral places living out the time you would have in your normal life. And it's not good for the soul. So it's really important to, I think, stay stable, stay calm, and realize, all of our money and our possessions are important and we certainly need them. But I think people focus on that so much that we really freak out when we're going to lose something. You know what? We're all going to lose it anyhow. And we're not leaving here with anything. You don't even get your body. You leave here. The only thing we have is the conscious self-awareness we've gained in this life. All the great thinkers, you and I love Krishnamurti and Deepak Chopra and so many others, Paramahansa Yogananda, and so many great thinkers. And they all say the same thing. The ego is the sense of self. And it's important to have that, otherwise we wouldn't, take care of ourselves. But I think when we let that rule us to the point where it drives us crazy, that might be why a lot of people live so long, is because in some of these tribes in foreign places, I actually have a book right now that they're studying all these different ancient places where people would live on average to 90 to 100 years or more.
Well, their focus is very different. What they're focused on in life is very, very different.
My grandmother lived to 102, and she ran her business until she was 96 or 97. And she always had a positive attitude, always just loved to get up and work every day. And she painted, birthday cakes and wedding cakes. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I just loved her. We used to sit up till wee hours in the morning talking and just about all kinds of things. So probably one of the most favorite person in my life was her. And I just really regretted it when, we got separated, but amazing. And it was her attitude. It had a lot to do with it.
Right. Well, my great grandma, about her, she lived to 112, and she was driving a tractor on her farm up until she was 111 and a half. So she must have had a positive attitude.
She had to have a really, that is so cool.
It's pretty amazing.
112. Just think about that. And you said she was healthy until then?
Until about 111 and a half. Yeah. That's when she had to start laying down. But pretty amazing. Hey,
that's a pretty good run, 111 and a half. I'll tell you what, God, if I can get even to 90.
It's definitely a good run. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. And anything you want to close with, or? No,
I think the message is, the winter solstice is a great time for us all to meditate. And remember, I think thoughts really have power. And if, whatever we can do to meditate and say, truth has got to prevail here. It really does. Because if the Constitution of this country and the Bill of Rights and these, one world orders take over, it's going to be hell for our children and the people of the future. And it's really up to us to really hold the space here. And I think we're going to see this be challenging, but I also see divinity winning. I really do. And that's the primary, that's also that progression, the Nadi progression of Jupiter over the United States. That's the one that really gives me pause for, this could work out. It ain't going to be easy, not based on what I'm seeing, that we could be the phoenix rising out of the ashes.
Good. Excellent.
Could be the phoenix rising out of the, you bet.
We have to be. But all right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, everyone who's watching. Have a beautiful holiday, and we will see you. Will we see everyone before the new year? Maybe.
I think so, yeah.
I think we might. If not, we'll see you right after it. So, but Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year. It's all coming. Take good care. See you next time.
Thanks for watching.